Regular viewers will remember that last month, in the days before the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, we spoke to Hatem Abudayyeh, who is the spokesperson for the March on the DNC Coalition. Hatem is also the national chair of the US Palestinian Community Network, a leading force in mobilizing Palestinians and allies across the country to protest US support for the Israeli genocide. As you might also remember, we weren't able to talk to Hatem for as long as we wanted. He was very, very busy at the time. He had 3 or 4 phone calls going on at the same time as he was helping to organize the March on the DNC. But we said we would invite him to come back, and we're very pleased that he's accepted our invitation to do so. Hi, Hatem.
Hello, friends. Good to see you again. And you should actually have Abubayyeh on for like 4 hours.
I wish we could. I wish we could. If the connections allowed it, we would. He's just incredible.
Yeah.
And he's he's an example of really all of our people in Gaza and the entirety of Palestine and the whole Arab world. I mean, folks that watch your show from the US and other parts of the world that don't really know much about Palestinians. He's a special young man, but so many of the young people there are like him, as brilliant as he is, as hopeful as he is, as revolutionary as he is. He's a treasure, as Noura said. He's incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we always lifts our hearts and our minds to see him. And as it does to see you, Hatem. So again, thank you for coming back, and let's get into it. I think we want to spend most of our time today talking about what comes next. But since we last saw you when you were organizing the March on the DNC, give us a recap of what happened at the DNC with the protests and with what happened in the convention venue at the United Center. Were you impressed with Kamala Harris's speech during the DNC? What do you think? We've talked about on this program the whole controversy about the Democrats having a Palestinian on stage or not. In the end, they refused to. What's your view about that? And so just give us your thoughts on the DNC.
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is that we were talking for months about how it was going to be the event of the season. And it really was. And it was the event of the season because of what happened outside, because of the protests, not because of what was happening inside the convention center, the United Center in Chicago. Clearly, it was a grand, incredible success. I mean, we had almost 40,000 people in the streets that week. We had predicted we would have tens of thousands in the streets. We had 20,000 on the first day on Monday, an incredible mobilization. 8,000 at a Wednesday protest, and 11,000 on the last day on Thursday, the night of Kamala Harris's speech. And so we were very, very proud of what we were able to accomplish. Like I reported previously, over 270 organizations had joined the coalition to march on the DNC, including, of course, my organization, United States Palestinian Community Network. I think it's important to shout out the other leaders of the coalition, the Black-led National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, Students for a Democratic Society across 80 campuses in the U.S., Students for Justice in Palestine, the national body representing a bunch of campuses across the U.S. as well, of course, anti-war committees across the Midwest, and so many others, a bunch of other Arab and Palestinian national organizations, the AFSCs and the Code Pinks of the world, a number of immigrant rights forces that I'll discuss more about when we talk about next steps. But really, there was the quantitative success of having these tens of thousands, almost 40,000 people in the streets that week, but also, the qualitative success, really the importance of having all of these forces from all of these different nationalities, ethnicities, religions, from people with no religion, different age groups, different parts of the country, across the Midwest mostly, of course, but we had folks that came from the West Coast and the South and the East Coast as well. And the significance of immigrant rights forces, Black liberation forces, the movement to fight against police crimes, the movement for police accountability, reproductive and women's rights, LGBTQ rights, all of these different social justice movements, all of these different forces represented with beautiful posters and banners and puppets represented on our stage both Monday and Thursday with powerful, powerful speeches about how the Democratic Party has taken for granted all of these communities and all of these issues for so many decades, but at the same time rising up in one unified voice saying, we understand right now the centrality of Palestine in the movement. We understand that the most important thing in the world today is to stop the genocide, the U.S. supported genocide against the Palestinian people of Gaza. And so the folks doing reproductive rights work, we're talking about reproductive rights in the context of Gaza and the genocide. And those who talked about women's rights, we're talking about women's rights in the context of women's rights in Gaza, women political prisoners, women who are being tortured and raped by Israeli authorities. Folks from all of the different social justice movement talking about their issues, their challenges with the Democrats, their struggles in the United States in the context of the genocide and the war on the Palestinian people. And so that was, in and of itself, a powerful, powerful vision that we had predicted, that we knew was going to happen that week, and that was projected really to millions and millions of people across the world. I've never ever been involved in an event that had this much press coverage, that had that I did this many interviews. It was the last 3-4 days of the week where was like 24/7. The phone was ringing and the interviews were happening, and so it projected to the entire world exactly what we had said, that Palestine would be the central issue, that the protests at the DNC would be much more significant than what happens inside. Um, and that's exactly what happened. We walked away at the end of the week incredibly, incredibly proud of the work of the coalition, incredibly proud of the Palestinian and Arab community that led the mobilizations, and incredibly proud about what we know will come next, and how we're going to build on the momentum and build on the hope that Abu Bakr talks about, because all of us do this work, and he does his journalism from Gaza, and you all do your journalism, and we all do our day-to-day community-based grassroots organizing, because we do have hope. Because at one point a few years ago, I thought like this liberation is not going to happen in my lifetime, and to be honest with you, I feel differently now. I think it is going to happen in my lifetime, and I'm going to be able to celebrate at some time in Gaza with Abu Bakr.
Hmm. Oh, you're muted, Ali.
Amen to that. Just before we shift to what comes next, any thoughts on this whole issue, just briefly, on having a Palestinian on stage and what that whole controversy meant, or what it would have meant? I've made my views about that known, so I'm not, but I just want to give you a chance to talk to that if you want to.
Yeah. So before I say that, I know you mentioned the speech, and I think it's important to talk a tiny bit about what happened in the building, especially on Thursday. So at the time um, that Kamala Harris was accepting the nomination, we actually had stopped our march of 11,000 people under the train tracks in Chicago, on Lake Street, which is just a few blocks north of the convention center. And the police, CPD, which has a sordid history of torture against Black and brown communities, of mass arrests, of attacks on the George Floyd uprising in 2020, on killing and maiming, black and brown residents of Chicago for decades and decades and decades, and had threatened mass arrests, had threatened our coalition, had threatened the leaders of the coalition, had threatened that they were going to implement mass arrests. Again, that night, threatened mass arrests, because we stopped there and we said, we are going to stop here. We are going to chant. We are going to hold our position, so that the Democrats and Kamala Harris, while she's accepting that nomination, understands that we're here protesting everything that they represent there and all of their unequivocal support of Israel. It was an incredible sight. I know that it was live streamed on the coalition's Instagram page. I know that it was all over social media, but it was just a powerful moment at that time, where we challenged the police directly. We did not, fall prey to their threats, and at the same time, the Democrats and the whole world knew what we were doing and why we were there. And so, obviously, the first thing she says is Israel has a right to defend itself, and that she will
And
always
that's
ensure.
Kamala Harris that
This
you're
is Kamala Harris, right? And will always ensure.
yeah, before you get, just to
Yeah.
point out that this is you on the protest rally stage, and this photo, which just really, I think it's such a great picture, is by our colleague Maureen Murphy. So we just wanted to show that to give a sense of what it looked like. But go ahead,
Yeah, I
Kamala Harris.
appreciate that. I appreciate that picture by Maureen too. I hadn't seen it before. She's wonderful. So Kamala says, essentially says that Israel has the right to defend itself. Um, as her first statement about Palestine at the convention, in the wake of 40,000 of our people being killed, possibly tens of thousands more under the rubble. All of these, another 100,000 who have been killed because of disease that Abu Bakr describes, and because of starvation, and because of indirect causes from the genocide. Reminded me, when we started talking about those numbers with the Lancet report. It reminded me of the days of the Iraq War, and how we were talking about hundreds of thousands who weren't directly killed by the U.S. invasion and occupation, but that died because of the war and the indirect quote
The
unquote
sanctions,
causes.
Yeah.
Because of course the sanctions, the
The
criminal
Bill
sanctions.
Clinton, Al Gore sanctions on Iraq
Exactly. And
murdered
so, now
hundreds
we're
of
in
thousands of people.
another Democratic administration that has done the same thing, that is responsible for the same thing. And just like, how tone deaf can you be that you open with the right for Israel to defend itself when it's been dropping bombs and missiles on the Palestinian people for 11 months, right? And so, clearly she said nothing that would dissuade any of us from saying what we've been saying for months, which is that this is a U.S. war. Yes, the U.S. boots are not on the ground except for the CIA and the advisors, of course. But make no mistake, this is the Vietnam War of our era. This is a U.S. war, and the people that are out there that are fighting for Palestinian justice and rights and liberation are also fighting to stop a U.S. war. That's why the comparisons with Vietnam are very apt. We've been saying it for months. We believe it very strongly that this is a broader than Palestine on some level as well, and it is an anti-war movement also. And so, yes, Kamala Harris, there's nothing that she said that made us think that she doesn't represent the policies of Joe Biden in the United States. That it would be politically immature of us to say that there isn't a lesser of two evils when it comes to domestic policy. Obviously, nobody wants Donald Trump to be the president of the United States either. But when it comes down to it, there is no lesser of two evils when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to the Arab world, when it comes to foreign policy generally. They are in absolute lockstep. You could see it with the Ukraine and Russia. You could see it with Palestine and Iraq and Syria and Libya and all of the other Arab world countries. And so that's why There was nothing that inspired anybody among our protesters, of course, and really nobody else that cares about stopping this genocide, from what Kamala said. And so I don't begrudge the diversity of tactics in the movement. We never criticize, nobody from our coalition, and USPCN more specifically doesn't criticize the other folks in the movement who believe in other kinds of tactics. And so those Palestinians and Arabs who are in the Democratic Party, who believe that they can make changes from within, we don't begrudge them that organizing, but we also don't try to beg to be at the table, with those who are perpetrating this genocide. And I think that it would be a stronger policy, a much more powerful thing if those folks rejected that party directly, whether at the convention or since. I think that would be a really, really powerful message. But we know those folks. We have done some work with the uncommitted and the uninstructed movements in Michigan and Wisconsin, respectively. And let's be honest, like 700,000 people who normally vote Democrat that did not vote in those 4 states in the presidential primaries, that is a significant thing. And I believe on some level the Democrats have to be fearful of what might happen in Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin, especially 3 of the 4 states that voted uncommitted or uninstructed. In Illinois, we don't have an uncommitted choice, so the Arabs and Palestinians here led a movement for folks to write in Gaza, which is what they did. And so among that 700,000 non-votes for the Democrats, we counted the Gaza votes in Illinois as well. But there is a place for all kinds of tactics, and I don't think that we're going to get much but by fighting the Democrats from within. But if folks feel like that's what they can do and what they need to do, and that's the level of organizing that they're going to be able to provide, then we watch and we support it, and we'll evaluate it afterwards.
Well, that's very diplomatic, and I wanted to ask you that question because we had this discussion also last week with Stephen Salaita, and we want to hear, different or nuanced views on it. So, but that was very, very diplomatic. I think we can all read into your answer exactly what we want to.
We also work in united fronts as well, and so there's we build coalitions. There's what we call different united fronts at different times, and so this is all part of organizing tactics and strategies, that folks like us have learned and studied over the years.
Yeah, and you're in the middle of it, so you're dealing with everyone, whereas I can sit here and say what I like. And but
I was going to say that, but I'm glad you did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to kind of like talk about the bigger picture, like what happens next in these months before the election. God help us all. And talking about where the energy of the March on the DNC Coalition, for example, and kind of the wider work of USPCN and other grassroots community-based anti-war organizations, where does that energy kind of go? And not just in the next 2 months, but for the long haul. We're seeing students going back to classes. There have already been really incredible protests at Columbia University in New York yesterday, and cops were called to beat students on the campus of the University of Michigan. It looks like there were kind of like There were a lot of unknowns about what was going to happen to the student intifada, which picked up steam earlier this year, and then there was the summer break. But it looks like the student intifada is continuing. Where does the movement go? What are you what are you looking at closely?
Yeah, so I think I wanted to talk about the student movement for sure, and I'm glad you brought that up. But before we do that, I think there's so many positive um, takeaways from the DNC and some of the some of the forces that we worked with in the DNC have always been supportive of Palestine, have always worked very closely with us. Especially folks in the Black Liberation Movement. One of the things that you all know that just drives the Zionists in this country batty is the fact that we have such a close relationship with the Black Liberation Movement in this country, and the fact of the matter is that the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression is essentially a sister organization to USPCN. In Chicago, we have a very special relationship, but we have it on the national level as well. And so the folks from those communities recognize that their unity with us is not just based on solidarity and the fact that that they need to support us at this time and they need to help us stop this genocide, but also based on the fact that it is the same elements that are oppressing us both. The U.S. government and the racial profiling in this country and the repression against the Black Liberation Movement in this country are the same forces that are repressing Palestinians and supporting Israel's genocide against our people. And so that's why we recognize we can't win this thing by ourselves, right? There's a united fronts that happen and unity that happen inside Palestine, inside Gaza, among different political forces, different ideological forces in Palestine who unite to defeat the occupation and the colonization. And the same thing happens here. Palestinian community in Chicago is a significant one, but the Palestinian community by itself is not super significant. And the only way to be able to win what we're trying to win, to defeat the Israeli occupation, to stop this genocide, is unity with other oppressed nationality forces and oppressed communities. And so the Black Liberation Movement being the most important of them all. But there are also a number of new forces that emerged around the DNC, and this is what I want to talk about because I think it's really, really important to understand that immigrant rights organizations and forces who have always supported us, but were never necessarily able to come out publicly and do so, did do that for the DNC. And a local Korean organization named the Hana Center, a national Korean organization named Nakasek, Mehente, which is a national Mexican and Central American organization with the leadership almost exclusively undocumented immigrants, the Legalization for All Network, again advocating for undocumented immigrants in this country, fighting for comprehensive immigration reform and legalization for all, came out with contingents, with their posters, with their banners, marching with us. They spoke on our stage, they spoke in our press conferences. And that is very, very exciting for us because now we're going to be able to move forward with another really important sector, the immigrant rights sector in this country. And remember, the immigrant rights forces in this country also feel like they've been taken for granted by the Democrats, also have major critiques of Biden and Harris about the militarization of the border, about the fact that there's so many people being detained and deported from those communities. Remember, more people were deported under Obama's Democratic presidency in this country than any other presidency ever in the history of this country. That was a Democrat, and that was a Democrat that was considered, liberal even. And so the same things are happening right now. And the fact that these folks protested with us at the DNC, supported the centrality of the issue of Palestine, and are going to continue to work with us going forward across the next 2 months, leading to the election and beyond, is a very, very powerful development. And again, workers' rights organizations, women's and reproductive rights organizations, who have always been in support, especially the progressive elements of those movements, but now are doing so a little bit more publicly. I think, Nura, that's very, very important. And then you mentioned the student movement. We're very excited about the fact that the school year is starting. A lot of these young people who were attacked in the spring, who were silenced or attempted, the attempts to silence them, the fact that some were suspended, there were threats of expulsion, and they're still coming back ready to build again in the fall. Very, very brave young people who remind me so much of Abubayyeh and our young folks in Gaza. But we also know that the repression continues, and it's escalating. There's an updated code of conduct at New York University. I don't know if you all have talked about that already yet.
Yeah.
But now Zionist and Zionism, if they are attacked, they are considered a protected class at New York University. And if you attack Zionism or Zionists, politically attack them on your campus, you could be violating non-discrimination
And this is a
policies.
long-term, it's important to point out, this has been a long-term goal of the Israel lobby and the Zionist movement. Of course, we know Zionism it's not a religion, it's not an ethnicity, it's not a race, it's a political ideology like Jim Crow or like Nazism or just common or garden racism. It's a racist settler colonial ideology. A Zionist, someone who believes that people from Montreal or Brooklyn or Rio de Janeiro or Paris have more right to live in Palestine than Palestinians. That's all Zionism is. No mystery about it. And yes, but because it's so clearly indefensible, Zionists have tried for years to define Zionism as being similar to a religion or an ethnicity, so that if you attack this completely illegitimate, repulsive, racist, and genocidal political ideology, that's the same as attacking someone just for being Jewish or just for being Muslim or just for being black or whatever else it might be. So it's a significant advance for the Zionist movement that they've gotten NYU to actually write this into their regulations for, I think, the first time. I know, Nora, you follow these things closely.
Yeah, it is the first time that a university has announced that it is specifically coddling Zionist ideology and trying to make it a protected class or protected identity. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, like this has been in the works for a long time. They've tried to do this at the federal level, at different state levels. But yeah, so I know some students at NYU. They are not taking this seriously. They know, they're far smarter than the administration at NYU. They know their rights. They know what Zionism is and what it's not. Many of those students are Jewish anti-Zionists who have a very, well educated understanding of what Zionism is and who Zionism has been used against. And so, civil rights organizations, Palestine Legal, the ACLU, they've already said that this will be challenged, obviously. But yeah, I mean, we all know, like in Hatem, you know this intimately, that the point is to create a culture of fear and intimidation, and especially on college campuses, create a chilling effect so that students are like, oh, I don't even want to get involved. I'm here, on a scholarship, or, I'll lose my access to getting a job in the future. But yeah, it's encouraging.
And I think on some level, Nuda, on some level that works, right? Like
Oh, absolutely.
we've seen the repression and how it works in different communities and dissuades people from coming out. But like I don't think it's going to work with these students.
No.
And I think part of the reason is because we are in a different period as well. And now we have the National Lawyers Guild, we have Palestine Legal, we have the People's Law Office in Chicago. The National Lawyers Guild and the People's Law Office did incredible work around the DNC, have already represented over 400 people since October who have been arrested in all of these protests. We've had over 100 protests since October only in Chicago, over 50 protests led by the citywide Chicago Coalition for Justice in Palestine, which is made up of all the major Palestinian organizations in the city. And we came back, exactly a week after the DNC, and we brought another 1,000 people into the streets of Chicago. So I don't think anybody is going to be slowing down at all. I don't think the students will be slowing down. They know they're going to have the protection of the national and local organizations like USPCN and so many others. They know they're going to have the defense and protection of the National Lawyers Guild and the Pal Legal and People's Law Office and other forces like that. And we, the student movement is part and parcel of the national movement. And so, we're going to be there with them. We supported them in the encampments all across the country, not just USPCN, but all the national Palestinian organizations in the cities where they have chapters. Had been, in Michigan and California. We were down at UCLA. We were at San Francisco State University. A number of USPCN leaders, helped win the historic victory at San Francisco State, where they voted to divest from a couple of the companies that are providing weapons manufacturing and that get sent to Israel. So this thing is not slowing down. We didn't even really get even a weekend's worth of vacation from the DNC. We're going full steam ahead, continuing to organize these protests with the idea of arms embargo as the goal, stopping U.S. aid. And the one thing that we've been doing from day one that I think is really, really important for people to understand: yes, there are mass mobilizations, and yes, those are peaceful protests. And yes, those are important because you have different age groups and people with different physical abilities, different immigration statuses. You need people to be able to know that they're going to be safe in those spaces, and we keep us safe. That's a slogan that comes from the Black Liberation Movement as well. We do it. Our marshals did it. Our organizers did it. It's not the cops. They don't keep us safe. They're not friends to the Palestine support movement in this country, regardless of the victory lap that the Chicago Police Department made after the DNC. They had spent months and months trying to keep us from accomplishing our goals, and then at the end of it, they talked about what a great job they did in not implementing mass arrests and not bashing people's heads in. But that was our work. That wasn't the work of the CPD. They're not our friends. The state apparatus in this country is in place to support the political objectives of this country, and that means that they will continue to repress our movement the way they always have, and that is including the students, and that's what New York University's new policy represents. But we're looking at the elections in 2 months. We're looking at the inauguration and mass protests at the inauguration as well, and in Chicago and a lot of other places, just continuing to escalate and to disrupt. There is a South Side Congresswoman named Robin Kelly a couple months back when USPCN and some partners disrupted another event of Congress people there who are supportive of the genocide. And she grabbed the mic and she said, "My colleagues do not do public events any longer because they know that you all are going to be here disrupting." And she thought that was some kind of attack on us, and we considered it
Confirmation of success. Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
confirmation of success and a compliment. So
Yeah.
we are calling on people to continue to do that. The Democrats are responsible. The Democrats are in power. Biden is the president. Harris is the vice president. They should be and are legitimate targets of our protests. We should shut them down and we should disrupt them wherever they go, anywhere in the country.
Well, Hatem, our sort of headline question was what comes next, and I think you've just answered it very, very clearly. What comes next? And I know that people around the country are going to be joining those protests and getting mobilized, and that is what we're hearing from everyone in Gaza, that they need and want to see. That's where their hope is, as Abu Bakr told us.